Our speaker today is Dunn, and really excited to have her here. Dunn is the founder and executive director at Cat Town in Oakland, California. Anne founded Cat Town when she was a volunteer at Oakland Animal Services, which is Oakland's municipal shelter. Anne saw the challenges that the severely under-resourced shelter was facing and joined other volunteers to create an alternative to the shelter for cats that were at the greatest risk of euthanasia. Cat Town now has a foster program since 2011, a cat cafe that they launched in 2014, and the studio of Cat Town sort of launched more recently. Cat Town's a major player in helping the city of Oakland save over 90% of the cats in their care. And thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming out today, and thanks to Maddie's for giving us this opportunity to share what we've learned over 7 years in helping cats that don't do well in a shelter environment. And just a little bit about Cat Town. As Sheila mentioned, our mission is getting cats out of the shelter who would otherwise be euthanized. So we deal pretty exclusively with adults who are under-socialized, cats who are in the shelter and are shut down or seem really aggressive there. Cats who have medical issues, senior cats, and kittens that come into the shelter that are 4 months and older and haven't been socialized. Our model is to get a cat into an environment where he feels safe and to let potential adopters meet him there. And what I'm going to talk about today is how our perceptions of cats' behavior is shaped by the environment, but that we don't necessarily always take that into account when we're talking to potential adopters. And then the other piece is how potential adopters might put obstacles in their path to taking a chance on a cat, and how we might get them to take that leap. So I'm going to start with a happy story. It doesn't look like it's going to start as a happy story, but this is a cat who, a pretty typical cat for us. So this is Buzz, who's at Oakland Animal Services. And while he's there, he got the nickname the Angry Tabby. So that's not a cat. I'm not going to stick my hand in that cage and interact with that cat, but we've learned to disregard what we're seeing. So this is Buzz at Cat Town after a couple weeks of decompressing. So you can see it's a pretty different cat. And we were pretty easily able then to get Buzz adopted. This is Buzz with his adopter, who we've been able to stay in close contact with. So I can tell you that Buzz doesn't have a difficult bone in his body. He's a cat who is having a healthy reaction to a difficult situation. So then just really to think about, I think there's a lot of really good information about, how to be careful in marketing cats so that you're not telling too much to scare people away. But I want to even step back further and think about what are the observations that we make that then become predictive of who a cat is and what they need, and how we might limit the ability to get a cat adopted based on our own thought process. So let me give you an example. This is Birdie at the shelter. So you can see she's breathing really heavily, her ears are flat, her pupils are dilated. So if I were to ask you, what do you think Birdie might need to be successful in a home? I think it would be, a lot of people might think she probably needs an experienced guardian, a quiet home, no kids. So in thinking about that, we've kind of boxed her into a pretty limited set of circumstances that we think might work for her. This is Birdie at Cat Town. We took this video about 24 hours after she arrived, and this is about a week after the video that I just showed. So this is the same cat. We obviously haven't changed the cat, we've just changed the environment. So thinking about, now all these possibilities have opened up. I'm going to feel really good about her going home with kids. I'm not going to feel any need to restrict the choices. So I think what's important here is not only the observations we make, but that the ways in which potential adopters might perceive a cat in an environment without taking into consideration what are all the variables that are at play for that cat, that may cause the cat to be stressed. So especially if we're talking about a municipal shelter where there are barking dogs and where cats don't get out of their cages very often, I think even people who have lived with cats their whole lives don't tend to be particularly sensitive to what impact that might have on a cat, and how that behavior is not at all predictive of who they might be in a real home. So then the question is, how do we make it easy for people to take a chance on a cat who maybe seems aggressive? Maybe a cat, for us, a typical scenario is somebody goes to a foster home and the cat is hiding under the couch. So one of the things that we have done is really to try to make things as flexible as possible so people don't feel that pressure of, I'm making a 20-year commitment on a cat that I really don't even know who he is. So some of the approaches that we take, so for senior cats, for cats that are 10 years and older, we know that the greatest obstacle for a senior cat getting adopted is the fear of medical bills, and that fear that maybe I'm going to get myself into a situation where I really don't feel equipped to help the cat. Maybe things are going to become complicated. So our In It for Life program gives, one, we pay vet bills, reasonable vet bills for life for cats that are 10 years and older. And I think the bigger thing that we do is we will handhold people through the entire adoption. And I don't mean just taking the cat home, but I mean, it could be 2 years later and you're wondering, what is the quality of life of my cat? We will help people with end of life decisions. It's not unusual for us to be present when one of our adopted senior cats is getting euthanized. The other is our foster to adopt program. So 2 parts. One, I think having a foster program for adults is essential. So many cats just simply don't do well in a shelter environment. And then foster to adopt is, you know what it is, but it's giving people the opportunity to take a chance and to say, let's lower the barrier of entry. You don't need to make a commitment until the cat's in your home and you have a good sense of who he is and you feel that this is a good match. And what comes with that, for foster to adopt, and really for any of our cats where we think that people are going to have a more challenging experience for the cat getting acclimated, is what we call our case management program. So we are very proactive in reaching out to our adopters, giving them whatever support. And I always say we're in it for the long haul. So you can reach out next week, you can reach out in 5 years, and we're going to be there to support you. And the last, which I think is also so important, we say this to every adopter, is it's not a failure if you bring the cat back. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And if we are able to get a cat into a home environment, we're going to learn so much more about the cat. We're going to learn more about what you're looking for. So it's all a win. I'm thinking about how we go about promoting cats, and especially cats that have been in our program for a while. I mean, I think it's really easy for people to start to form a negative impression if they think, if nobody's adopting that cat, what's wrong with that cat? And for our cats, usually we're going to see a pretty dramatic transformation story. We generally focus on cats that are really fearful initially, and it takes them a while to settle in. And over time, we start to see these really great milestones. And so instead of saying, this is a crisis, we've had this cat for 6 months, is each time we're going to share a story about the cat, it's going to be something positive, it's going to be something exciting. So here's a situation. We have Duncan, who's been in a foster home for about 6 months, and he's a really shy cat. So if you're going to meet him, he is one of those cats that's going to hide under the bed. But this is a video that one of his fosters took, and this is just a screenshot, so I can't show the video, but just the concept of it is, when we mention Duncan on our Facebook page, we're going to say, here's this amazing breakthrough, here's this really happy moment in Duncan's story, and oh, by the way, he's still available for adoption. Another way that we really try to tell the story of the work that we do and to get people excited about taking a chance on a cat is letting our adopters tell the stories themselves. And so this is a screenshot of our blog on our website. And this is a story which I encourage you to find, because it's an amazing story of a woman who has some physical challenges herself, and she adopted a really under-socialized cat, and this is their journey together of both of their lives being changed. And so part of it is, this isn't a sad story about a scared cat. This isn't a beautiful transformation story. And so as you read it, you think, I would love to be part of that. I would love to have that experience. And I think that, so thinking kind of longer term about how you inspire people to take chances is to see, for us, if you follow Cat 10, you're going to see before and after, and you're going to start to see what is possible once a cat feels safe. I'm going to end with a story of two cats that we had adopted recently. Both had feline leukemia, and they were adopted separately. They were in our adoption center. And I think, again, in terms of how you create a perception of what the situation is I think that we could say, here's a cat who's 6 months old and he has feline leukemia, and isn't that sad, and don't you feel sorry for him, and won't you please take him home? Or, as we did in this case, because we have a great adoption center, we say, here's Stan, he's such an amazing cat, go spend time with him. And once you've fallen in love with him, let us tell you that he's got feline leukemia and what that means. And so this woman, this is a picture of Stan's adopter. After falling in love with him, she went home and she sent us this email, just saying, without us asking her, would you please, please, please take him, to say, I want to be that one. So I leave you with that, which is there are so many good people who want to help, and I feel like it's our responsibility, our work is just to make that easy and joyful. I'm going to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Anne. What an amazing presentation in such a short period of time. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat area or go ahead and raise your hand. I thought one thing that you said, Anne, was just, everything you said was very powerful, but one thing just really hit home for me, and that's when you were showing that first video of that unhappy shelter cat, and you said he doesn't have a difficult bone in his body. He's a healthy cat responding to an unnatural environment. And I just think that's so, so important. And thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to start with the first question. Our first question is, how does your foster to adopt program work?
The way that we do it, we try to keep it as flexible as possible. So it's really like adopting, meaning you're responsible for the cat, you're responsible for the supplies, the cat's in your home, and we're going to give you support. And I think the key to it is there's not a time frame. So we're not going to say 30 days and time is up, you must decide. We really say it's up to you to take all the time that you need to figure out that this cat is the right fit. And I think the less pressure, the more likely people are to land on yes.
Great, thank you, Anne. Our next question is, how do you draw the limits on what you will cover in medical costs for older cat adoptions?
Well, there's a couple pieces to it. One, we require that people go to our vet, and our vet gives us a pretty steep discount. And the main thing is that we won't cover any expensive diagnostics. So what we say, we will cover reasonable care. And then the other key piece is having a conversation before the cat goes home about end of life decisions and how we approach that. And so one thing we want to make clear is we won't pay for services where we're prolonging a cat's life when we think that cat is suffering.
Great, thank you. And to follow up with that, with regard to the veterinarian that you partner with, how did you find that veterinarian, and what do you do to keep that relationship with the veterinarian strong and keep the veterinarian supporting you?
Well, I mean, I would say just kind of generally, I think everything is about relationships. And so in the same way we have a fantastic relationship with the shelter that we partner with, is we're just respectful of their limits, and so we don't ask for things that they might feel is unreasonable. But in truth, I feel like it's like so many things, we just lucked on them. We started working with them when we first started operating, and I think it's just a relationship that's developed over time, and so they trust us to be reasonable, and they're willing to go a little extra to make things work for us.
Thank you, Anne. Next question is from Samantha. Have you had success adopting out incontinent cats that need expression several times a day? We have 3 of them right now, and they are our longest residents and get no interest from the public. Thank you.
I'll be honest, we don't do a lot of extraordinary medical stuff because there are other organizations that help with that. We did have one instance recently of a cat who had been adopted. He was healthy when he was adopted from the shelter, and then it seems like somebody pulled his tail, and so he was unable. He continues to leak urine, and the person who ended up adopting him was one of our fosters, and or one of our volunteers rather. And so we had him in our adoption center so people could meet him, and he's the sweetest cat. And so there were actually a few people who were interested in him. So I think that so the short answer is we don't do a lot of that. But I do think that with anything that's more challenging is it's so much about actually meeting the animal and falling in love with the animal, and then being willing to take those things on versus leading with, here's a cat who has these issues. Most people are going to say no.
Great, thank you, Anne. Next question is, for your In It for Life program, do you apply for grants? How do you fund this program?
Well, you know, it's interesting. So we do get a little bit of grant funding for it. It's something that we did initially, actually, because we were participating in a Maddie's Fund grant program, the In It for Life program, which is a local program that has since ended, and that was how we started. And so we went through a period where we thought we can no longer afford to do this. But what we realized is if we're committed to saving these senior cats as we are, what we were finding is we were having them in foster homes for prolonged periods, and we were paying for their medical care anyway. And then we thought, well, if we can at least get half of those cats adopted, most people don't take us up on it. So, you know, again, it's like any insurance policy. It makes people feel better to take the chance, but we ultimately end up spending less by doing it this way than if we didn't offer it and fewer people would be willing to adopt the cats.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, do you ever do waived adoption fees? Our shelter is doing it right now, and we can't seem to get any cat adoptions.
We do. But I actually, you know, when I was a volunteer at the shelter, and I would see sometimes the shelter would do, and again, there's through a Maddie's Fund program of adoption days, which again was a local thing, and they did waived adoption fees, and it was tremendously successful. And so I've seen it really work, but I'll be honest, when we do it at Cat Town, it doesn't seem to be a big draw.
All right, thank you, Anne. And so other suggestions for Nicole, who asked that question about how to get her cat adoptions to increase?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just so she did this waived adoption fee. They're doing this waived adoption fee program, and it's not really working. What suggestions do you have for her to start increasing their cat adoptions?
Well, I mean, not knowing very much about the situation, and I'm actually moving to the next slide, which is my contact information. So anybody's welcome to reach out to me for more detail. But I would say, you know, I think one of the things that we really focus on, and this is partly where we, you know, how we landed on the idea of having the cat cafe, is, you know, how do you get people to come? How do you get people to walk in the door to begin with? How do you inspire people to want to help? So without more information about what you're already doing, it's hard for me to say. But I mean, I just say that our kind of approach is really to make it joyful to help. And so, you know, to tell positive stories that people want to be a part of.
Great, thank you. And next question is, how do you reach out to the public? Mostly through social media, or do people learn about the cats because of the cat cafe?
Both. So we actually have a really great social media presence. So, you know, the basics with Facebook and Instagram primarily. And then the cat cafe is right in the middle of Oakland, and so a lot of people come in because they walk by and they see their cats inside and they're really curious. And so having that, and I don't know how much a difference this makes now, but this was the first cat cafe in the United States, so we got a lot of attention as a result of that. So we really have become a significant part of our community, and a lot of people are following. They've become very invested in what's happening with our cats. So I would say it's a combination of things that have drawn people in.
Great, thank you. And this is our last question, unless anyone has, oh, we just got another question added. So next question is, do you have a dedicated person that manages your social media?
Yes, we're a very small team, but I would say one of the things that we've done from the very beginning is try to tell our story, and realizing that it's just not enough just to put your head down and do the work. People need to know. And for us, part of what's really important is sharing our mission, because our mission is somewhat different from other organizations, in that we're really just focusing on the hardest to place, and helping people understand what the need is in the community and how they can get involved in a positive way. So yeah, I think that's absolutely essential to have somebody that is focused on that.
Great, thank you. And our last question, unless more come in, do you get many cats returned?
No, we don't. I mean, one of the things that, and this is where I think our case management, it's not that we get none returned, but we don't get a lot of returns. I think, and part of that, a huge part of that, is we are so proactive in supporting our adopters. And sometimes we will help them make the decision to bring a cat back because it seems like that's the right thing to do. But I think by getting people through that first month or two, whether it's an introduction to another cat, or bringing a really shy cat into their house and, watching them hide for a bit, I think that the support that we provide really makes a huge difference.
Great, thank you, Anne. And we got a comment, which I thought was a very appropriate and wonderful comment, from Amy M., who says, thanks, Anne, for more great information. I was out there for the apprenticeship earlier in the month, and I'm so grateful for everything I learned from you. That's all I have to add. And so did want to comment that Anne and her amazing team at Cat Town does offer an apprenticeship program where you go out and spend some time with Anne's team, learning about difficult to place cats and how to find them home. You can learn more about that on the Maddie's Fund website. Thank you so much for joining us, Anne, and thank all of you for spending some of your day with us today. This is the end of our session. This video will be posted on our website within 24 hours if you want to share it with colleagues. Thank you all so much.